Good evening to everyone who has joined us today for this lecture on the topic Right to Digital Accessibility. I, Vandana Yadav, student convener for the Debate and Discussion Society, extends you all a very warm welcome. Today we have with us our esteemed guest and keynote speaker, Mr. Rahul Bajaj. He is currently a senior resident fellow at Vidhi Center for Legal Policy. Prior to this, he has also been the recipient of the prestigious Rhodes Scholarship and completed his BCL and MPhil in law from the University of Oxford. His area of interest lies in disability rights law. He is deeply connected with the subject and has extensively worked and researched at the grassroots levels on this subject. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. I yield the floor to you now, sir.
Thanks very much, Vandana. I'm joined here by two colleagues, Amar Jain and Turab Chintanawala, with whom I am working on digital accessibility currently as part of an initiative that we will tell you more about. Now, let me thank you for the opportunity to speak here today and to share my thoughts on digital accessibility. Let me begin by sharing an incident that took place yesterday, which really brings into sharp focus the importance of having the conversation that we are having today. I think it, even though inadvertently, serves as a great advertisement for the event that we are having today. So an invitation to this event was shared with me yesterday afternoon, containing a link to the Google Meet link, the time of the event, the topic, my details, etc. However, that invitation was shared with me on WhatsApp in the form of an image, which had no description. And one thing that was not mentioned about me in the introduction, but that is important to know in this context, is that I am blind, and what that means is that I don't access the screen with my eyes, but instead I access it with my ears. What that means is that I listen to the content on the screen, whether it be the computer screen or whether it be a computer screen or a phone screen, with the help of technology that speaks out the content to me in a synthetic voice. Now, that technology, which is called a screen reader, does not deal well with images. It can't make out the content of an image unless you process it in a certain way. And therefore, the way to be able to access an image is if the person making it provides what is called an image description, which the picture in question did not have. Now, what is an image description? Does anyone know? An image description is basically a short textual description of an image on a screen using what we call alt text. Despite that, what is it that resulted in you not knowing that as a blind person, I would not be able to access a pictorial invitation to the event?
This is Anumeha. I'll just intervene here and answer your question. I think because this is something that also led me to think that why is it that we took for granted that this is something that you could access, and I think it's perhaps not just a lack of experience and also lack of information and accessibility to information, in that sense that that awareness is not there among people as to how we would make any and every event or any and every form of information more accessible. So I think it was not a lack of intention, but a lack of awareness on our part, which is obviously something that we need to overcome.
Yes, definitely. Thank you very much for saying that, Anumeha. So I think you've put your finger exactly on what I was getting at, which is the serious lack of, of course, we keep talking about awareness all the time, and there are multiple factors that result in this lack of awareness and lack of information that you speak about. The fact that we don't encounter people with disabilities in schools and colleges and at our workplaces, who exposure to whom would tell us that, look, this is something that you need to do. Now, for example, if the organizers of this event had friends with disabilities growing. And again, I don't say this to criticize them, but it's just a social reality that is common knowledge and that we cannot afford to ignore, that in our society, people with disabilities do not end up being in academic institutions like CLC in sufficient enough numbers for people to really know what their needs are. And therefore, as I was saying, if the organizers had access to friends with disabilities or partners with disabilities or colleagues with disabilities, they would have known what their precise needs are and address them accordingly. So it's not just enough to have good intent, which you do and which many people do, but it's also important to know how exactly to support someone with a disability. And in fact, the CRPD committee, which is the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the treaty body that is responsible for the effective implementation of the convention, in their general comment 2, which relates to digital accessibility, they talk about this. And they say that it's not bad intent that results in people not making digital accessibility a focus area, but it's lack of know-how and it's a lack of awareness. So this vividly demonstrates that. Now let me use this example as a launching point to talk a little more about what digital accessibility actually is. आखिरकार है किस बला का नाम digital accessibility? Digital accessibility means ensuring that all the technologies and services, the goods and services that we use, electronic goods and services, they're accessible to persons with disabilities. And this entails a number of small things. So for instance, if you are an app developer or a website developer, making sure that, so basically when you have buttons on a particular web page, where you have to, let's say, open up a form and you are putting in your details. So it asks you for your first name, last name, date of birth, whatever. Those have to be labeled so that someone using a screen reader can actually make out what those buttons stand for. Otherwise, I wouldn't know. If one was in red, one was in green, I wouldn't know what that means. So therefore, it has to have a text-based label. You have to make sure that calendars have clear layouts. Like they're not dynamic, that okay, they open somewhere at the bottom of the screen which a sighted person can make out, but I wouldn't even know to look for that at the bottom of the screen. But I'm actually alerted to the fact that this calendar has to be, this date has to be selected from here, month has to be selected from here, year has to be selected from here. These are a couple of very straightforward. Another one is CAPTCHA. So ensuring that wherever you need to use authentication mechanisms, that a visual CAPTCHA is accompanied by text and audio CAPTCHA for the benefit of people who are blind and also those who are deaf-blind, for whom merely for the deaf-blind who can't hear and see, even an audio CAPTCHA doesn't work, right? Because they can't hear. So therefore, they need a text-based CAPTCHA, like the Supreme Court website now has. Until a year ago, they had a visual CAPTCHA alone. So these are certain things that need to be kept in mind. And now I come to the legal framework on this point, which really is what I said I would focus on, the first theme I would focus on. So the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act of 2016 actually says digital accessibility, it guarantees it as a right in the sense that it requires all service providers under Section 46 of the Act, and that term includes public and private service providers, to make their offerings fully accessible within a period of 2 years from the date of promulgation of the relevant rules on the subject. Now, the Rights of Persons with Disabilities rules were published on 15th June 2017. 2 years after that, expired on 14th June 2019. One of the rules is on web accessibility, digital accessibility, and it contains what are called web content accessibility, Government of India guidelines on website accessibility, GIGW, which lay down very clear norms on what accessibility standards every app and website developer, earlier it was only websites, now it also covers apps, have to comply with in order to be disabled friendly. So, and these are based on international standards that have been published. And therefore, every service provider had to make their offerings accessible according to this framework by 14th June 2019. This is the position in theory, but what are we seeing in practice? We see that this right remains largely unrealized. And here, this is where the work that Amar, Turab, and I are trying to do comes into play, which is to see how we address this massive inaccessibility that exists in our society, digitally speaking. So we realized as individuals with disabilities who try to access a digital marketplace that there were so many things we could not do. Whether it is being able to access our banking services on the phone, like Turab uses ICICI Bank, whose app was inaccessible until not long ago. Whether it is being able to book a room using 𝐿 online, so that you can stay somewhere at a guest house or reasonably commodious accommodation whenever you are traveling. Whether it be being able to book airline tickets using Make My Trip, whether it be able to go on a date using Bumble or Tinder or any of these other apps. One or two of them work reasonably well, but beyond that, most don't. Whether it is being able to order food online using Zomato, or or order groceries using Instamart, book an appointment with a doctor using Practo. There is massive inaccessibility. So we decided to crowdsource a list of all these inaccessible platforms, and all three of us are lawyers, so we know what our legal entitlements are, and that is what gives us the confidence to pursue this cause, knowing that the law is on our side. To reach out to every service provider, tell them what issues exist with their platform, and not do it directly ourselves, but equip everyday users with disabilities with templates of complaints that they can use. They can send it to service providers, letting them know what their legal obligation is, what issues exist with their platform, and telling them that we are happy to help them fix it, but also clarifying that if they don't fix it, legal consequences will follow, which would include giving them a notice, taking them to court, in whatever appropriate forum, and taking the matter to its logical conclusion. And how far have we been successful so far in doing this? I mean, the record thus far has been mixed, and it's too early to tell, I would think, because we've been only at it for a couple of months. So only after we've done something like this for about 6 to 9 months at the very least, I think, can we say anything with some degree of confidence. But that's what we are trying to do. Now let me, with that, hand it over to Amar and Turab. So first, Turab is going to talk a little bit about how accessibility benefits everyone, not just people with disabilities, and anything else that he wants to, and then Amar will take it over from there, after which we can hear from the audience.
Thank you, Rahul. Am I audible to everyone?
Yes, very much so.
And visible also, if anyone else.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Canvas Law Center, for the opportunity, and thank you, Rahul, also for inviting me here. It is great to be here amongst you all. I think, so I would just, everyone here is a student, so I would just narrate and suppose ask you to visualize an incident. Say suppose you, all of you are law students. So suppose you go to South India, says to Bangalore, say NLS Bangalore, for a moot court competition, and there are three students around you. Like you go for lunch with them, and three students around you happen to be from South India. Say they are from Karnataka, and they continuously talk in Kannada, and you are sitting with them, they're laughing, they're discussing, but you don't understand anything, obviously, because you are supposedly from North India. So how would you feel? Means what would be your reaction, if anyone can reply here?
I would not feel anything weird. I think I would ask them what the joke is.
No, you can ask them, but then if they do not, if they do not bother to change the language continuously, how many times can you ask them?
So I'm actually in South India, and I've been using a lot of Google Translate.
No, I mean, yeah, I understand that technology is there, but the fact of the matter is that you would feel a little excluded. I'm not generalizing anything. If says if you go to another city also, there could be a problem. I'm just saying that if the language or the medium is not accessible to you, I'm sure you would feel very uncomfortable. That's what I think all of you all will agree. So that's how what persons with disabilities feel in many cases. Say recently, there was a WhatsApp group where I was part of, and as Rahul mentioned, like an image was posted there, and everybody started congratulating that person. Now I did not know what happened there. Like, what did he get married? Did he get some award? What was the case? So that is how persons with disabilities would feel excluded, or marginalized, because the content is not accessible for them. Imagine you go to a movie theater to watch a movie in a language which you do not know, and the subtitles are missing. So that is how we would feel, and hence accessibility is paramount for us. It is not only as a legal right, but it is a question of inclusion, accessibility, and I would say power of imagination, wherein you empathize with people whose experiences you do not share. Now you would ask me still why should we make it accessible? I mean, how does it matter to us? So there are some scenarios where accessibility would benefit you as well. Supposing you nowadays you you are part of an education institution. So nowadays in the COVID scenario, there was a lot of online education. So supposing now one of the problems which we face as persons with blindness particularly is that the share screen option is not accessible. Like when someone shares the screen and shares a PowerPoint presentation like through the Zoom meeting, we cannot access it. So suppose to make it accessible, it is shared in advance. So the blind person can read it and come. So even if the teacher doesn't verbalize it, it becomes easy for him. So then won't it be easy for everyone else? Obviously it would be, right? You can also access it. You will be better prepared for the class. Similarly, if supposing your audio doesn't work for some reason, and if there is closed captioning done, you can certainly on the closed captioning in the meeting and listen to the subtitles or captions which are being played, which are being displayed. So the fact being that it would benefit you also immensely. Also, another thing is that often for making things accessible to us, they have to simplify it. Particularly people with cognitive disability, if there are too many options, if the website is too complicated, it is simpler it becomes difficult for them to access it. So obviously, if the website is simply designed, won't it benefit you? Like a friend of mine, now if I give you a practical example of Swiggy and Zomato, he always prefers Swiggy because Swiggy is a simpler app. So accessibility benefits everyone, and we do not know what circumstances we may have in life. There is a certain chance that God forbid, some or the other person might get a disability. So it is paramount that accessibility is considered by all. Also, there are two other myths related to accessibility. One is that many people say that accessibility is very expensive. So now there are law students here. So often there is a famous quote by some lawyer, don't remember whom, but he said that if you find compliance is expensive, then you should try non-compliance. So similarly, in this case, where I have a practical example, that there was a bank whose website was not accessible, and we sent them a legal notice, and then they were compelled to make it accessible, but for which internally we learned that they spent around 15 lakh rupees. Now, I think Amar is an accessibility expert. He will talk to you later. I don't think if they would have planned accessibility in advance, I don't think they would have spent that much of money. So accessibility is not at all expensive. It is planned from the beginning. And the next is that people feel that accessibility is ugly, that if I do these accessibility measures, then the common people, the people without disability, that is the able-bodied, might have difficulty. But that is completely wrong. That is a myth. Like now, if the image description or the alternate text which Rahul was talking about, so if you add it, there is an option on all social media portals to have it. So only the persons with blindness, only our software can access it. None of you will come to know that image description is there. So no, you will only see the image. Also, if the audio description is done for movies, that is, audio description means describing the scenes where there is no, like when no one is talking, those are described to us. If you on audio description on Netflix, you can check. So that also has to be switched on. So for y'all, there will be no disturbance unless you switch it on. Similarly for closed captioning. So accessibility certainly doesn't make anything ugly. Even in fact, if it's done well, it may make the website more beautiful and logical. And today, as I was reading and preparing for this workshop, I also read somewhere that if the accessible websites are prioritized by Google in their search optimization, so search engine optimization prioritizes accessible websites. So accessibility certainly benefits everyone. With this, I hand over to Amar.
Yeah, and one thing I will say, Turab, if I might, is that there's this really nice article that I read when I was doing the BCL, on my master's program, by Elizabeth Emmons on the third-party benefits of accessibility, where she gives, I think, outlines 5 areas in which accessibility, benefits able-bodied people also. Hedonic benefits, informational benefits, and a few others which I'm now forgetting. But she lists out, like, for instance, how flexible working hours, for instance, benefit not just someone with a disability, but even able-bodied people who have caring responsibilities. Having like furniture that is comfortable, for example, benefit not just someone with a disability who needs it, but also able-bodied people. So you should really go check that out. I would suggest. Amar.
Thanks, Rahul. Thanks, Turab. Appreciate Campus Law Center for having us here. Just to quickly tell you about myself, as Rahul mentioned, all of us are lawyers. I've been a lawyer for 8 years. Have worked with law firms and now working with a good multinational IT company in contract management. I'm a certified professional in web accessibility as well from International Association of Accessibility Professionals. So Rahul and Turab already spoke about, what sort of kind of barriers exist to make, in terms of accessibility. Turab spoke about the myths around accessibility. What is the correct position? Now, I wanted to touch base with you on 2 things. Firstly, when we all as students graduate or complete our studies from colleges and start working, start getting into a professional life, many of you will be in the position of sort of advising your clients, advising companies on internal policies, on internal compliances, or the kind of, even setting the trends. If you're interacting with regulators, what should be our role as lawyers there? That's number 1. Second, also want to touch upon how difficult it is to achieve digital accessibility, and is it difficult at all? Right? These are the 2 quick things that I want to touch upon. So let's begin with the second one first. How difficult it is to achieve digital accessibility, and is it difficult at all? Right? So far we saw, the creators of technology did not think that, how will people with disability function given their disability? They went behind that approach and thought that, okay, fine, there is this problem. How can we functionally solve this? That's how the softwares and hardwares and etc. came into picture. That's how this whole screen reading software that Rahul was mentioning about came into picture, because they thought that, while people with blindness may not have eyesight, but to bridge that gap, what is the functional solution that we can provide? Now, the same approach, let's look at, at any platform or any content that we generate. Let's look at it this way. So we all upload photos on social media, whether it is WhatsApp, whether it is Instagram, Facebook, and common platforms, right? And we want, now, you will not possibly imagine that your content may also be viewed by audience which is blind. I was talking to a producer of a business channel, a business news channel, which I mean, it's a pretty good news channel in India, which deals with stock market on a day-to-day basis. And I had actually tweeted the producer saying that, you always display the levels of the market on the screen, whether it is Nifty or whether it is Bank Nifty. And, you say my the targets for today are displayed on the screen. But did you ever think that a person like me who tracks stock market on a daily basis and, trades like a trader will be able to see that screen? Did you ever imagine a blind person coming and looking at your screen? So he said, look, I understand what you're saying, but my practical problem is that I have very limited time of 5 minutes, 7 minutes on my show in which I have to complete my commentary and I have to give you the statistics. I said, fair enough. You have a valid point, because in media space, every second matters. Now, with this problem, I couldn't ask him practically to increase the time of the show or to say that, no, you should still read the level. It doesn't matter if you cut down on other things. That's not practical, because there are global events, there are domestic events, and everything needs description. At the same time, the news channel posts the video of that strategy or the outlook on their Twitter and other social media handles. I said, you can put these levels there, right? At least that becomes one level in which a person with blindness or any other person with disability who's unable to see the screen can read it. Now, how will you go about that? When you put out any picture or through your social media accounts, etc., you see a small box where you can type things out. Often it's labeled with type caption. And even if it's not caption, just remember that tiny little small text box is meant to enter meaningful image description. What will then happen? Suppose you posted a photograph of a good scene. You went to a place which has a good scenery, good natural beauty, all of that, and you described it. I'm at so and so place, and the view looks outside really amazing, quite sunny here, and things like that. Tomorrow, if I'm looking at your news feed, I will be able to instantly know, okay, this is what is happening here, and this is the place. Was it really difficult for you to think that by typing the description, I'll be able to reach out to a wider audience? No, right? Often we don't imagine ourselves in the shoes of people with disabilities. So when we think as lawyers, as professionals, we have to think for everyone. And this is not just applicable to lawyers, also applicable to technology creators, etc., etc. So when tomorrow we are, this is one example of how accessibility can be embedded. That's a common problem. You have images all around without description. Similarly, you may have, when you're planning for things, many of you may be starting your own firms or your own, sort of legal consultancy services. Discuss right at the beginning that your websites or all the modes through which you offer your consultation. Nowadays, people are doing a lot of video calls, website-based work. The documents that you create out of your setup, whether it is legal opinions, etc., discuss in the beginning that it has to be accessible to everyone. As a lawyer, I'll tell you, and Rahul and Turab will agree with me, one of the biggest challenges that we faced in our journey so far is the data that we get from either the firms itself or the clients. The data that we get is either scanned or handwritten, both of which are difficult to read. Right? Now, So in this situation, it would have been very good if the system from the beginning, for example, let me give you another example, stamp papers. On our contractual agreements, the first page that we see is the stamp paper, right? That stamp paper, most often than not, earlier used to be handwritten. The party name, the description, the instrument description, the article number, etc., etc. Ever since e-stamping came into picture, it made a lot of things accessible. Even people with blindness were able to read the e-stamp, right? So that's how we need to think through. So when we are, now I'll touch upon my first point, as I said, when we are in the position of guiding either regulators, policymakers, or any of our clients on account of compliance with any policy, whether it may have disability aspect mandated or not, we should think from all perspectives. We should always consider the widest possible audience that we may want to cater to. And that is how we should make our suggestions. That's very important. So achieving accessibility, whether it is digital or it is physical is little costlier, because if you've not planned in advance, then your retrofitting becomes difficult. But digital is not at all difficult. It's not at all costly. And there are people around, you can reach out to accessibility professionals, and these are subject matter experts on accessibility. They'll be more than happy to help in making anything and everything accessible. So, common things when you want to book a flight and you've paid for your ticket and you want to select the seat. Often, the aircraft map or the seat map is displayed. But has any airline thought that how can we make that map accessible for people with blindness? That's also possible. Cinema halls, multiple examples. But it's all about the thought process. As Animeha ma'am rightly said that, we often tend to, it's not really the intention which is bad, it's really the lack of awareness. So we need to think, we need to broaden our horizons. I think that is the key takeaway that I would like to give to everybody today. Thank you again, and open for any questions that people may have.
Thank you so much, sir, for all the insights and information. I would also like to take the opportunity here, which I missed earlier, to extend my special thanks to Amar sir and Turab sir for joining us, for making us aware, for sensitizing us about the subject and the challenges involved in it. Also, sir, your success story, your journey into the profession would surely be inspiring and motivating for many students out here. Accessibility is definitely the key to inclusion, and accessible barrier-free environment is a first and foremost step towards fulfilling the right of people with disabilities to participate in all areas of community life. With this, we would like to open the floor for questions and answers. I would request everyone to kindly post your questions or comments along with your year of study and institution in the chat box. If you are willing to directly interact with sir, please raise your hand. So when your name is called out, you can just unmute yourself and ask your question. So first question is by Siddhita Singh Rathore. Siddhita, if you're there in the meeting, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Vandana Di, am I visible?
Yes, you are, Siddha. Please go ahead.
Sir, as you all have rightly pointed out that when any system is accessible, we can perceive, comprehend and engage with it comfortably. So my question is that how can we develop the ability to present information in such a manner that it is both user-friendly and it retains its true meaning as well? Because I have noticed that when any information is altered, it loses its very essence, right? So how can we overcome that problem?
So the answer to that is, the ways of doing things can make sure that you don't lose out on information, because again, and Rahul's idea was not to summarize things or shorten things so that you only convey the most important or necessary information. To the extent possible, one of the principles of accessibility is that you should be able to make adaptations in such manner that anybody with any special needs is able to access it in an equal manner at par with others. So your information that you want to convey has to be at an equal level that you would otherwise convey to anybody who may not have accessibility needs. So that is the most important aspect.
Same here.
Thank you so much, sir. There is a need to understand the disability specific requirements, and yes. But just a follow-up question, sir. Apart from accessibility, do you think there are other limitations and barriers which need to be overcome so that the person with disability can actually gain benefit and contribute also to the internet? For example, affordability can also be one of the issue, or maybe unavailability at some places, coupled with lack of awareness, as we just mentioned.
I think, ma'am, again, and feel free guys to pitch in. Very first barrier that we all need to cross is the attitudinal barrier.
Yes,
Even today, in multiple places, we see people often perceive that because of disability, X person may not be able to do this. I'll give you my own example. I and my wife was at Levi's showroom, wanted to buy some stuff, and my wife was looking for stuff, and I was looking at other things, and I was like, what is this and what is that? I came across a jacket. I really liked it. Wanted to buy. The salesperson immediately said, "Oh no, this is very costly. You may not want to buy this." I said, "Where is the cost coming into picture when I'm willing to pay? Why do you want to have that perception just because you're seeing a blind person on your shop, right?" So often people have those perceptions sometimes with regard to functional ability of people with disability. People may think somebody who may have no eyesight, who is not able to lift pen and paper, how will they able to function? That's a wrong assumption, right? So we need to stop making assumptions, have more friendly interactions with people with disabilities. So that's one, that will lead to crossing the attitudinal barriers. Then, as you rightly said, unavailability of right information, access to technology, access to sort of right kind of resources, right kind of support networks who can help people with disabilities and people without disabilities to understand disability better. So those things, I think, in today's time, with the advent in open source technology, or with the advancements in information technology, internet, etc., those things have really sort of gotten down. I mean, the level of the severity of those mishaps has gotten down. But this is very important to have right attitude in the first place, I think.
Thank you so much, sir. So next question is by Ayush Rai. Ayush, if you're there in the meeting, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, ma'am. Am I audible and visible?
Yes.
Good evening to all. My question is, does the spirit of Section 43 of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act, that requires the appropriate government to take measures to promote development, production, and distribution of universally designed consumer products and accessories for general use for persons with disabilities, lies well within the spirit of DPSP, particularly referring to Article 45 and 47 of Constitution of India? If so, do you think that government should do more to get accessibility within the ambit of Part 3 of our Indian Constitution, that is fundamental rights?
Yeah, so this Article 45 and 47, what are they on? Could you just remind me? 47, I think, is on animal husbandry.
Yes, sir. No, sir. 47 talks about duty of the state to raise the level of nutrition and standard of living and to improve the public health.
And 45?
And so 45 talks about provision for early childhood care and education to children below the age of 6 years.
Oh, right. That got added when 21A was added. Understood. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, my answer to your, and also don't forget Article 41. So, my firm answer to your question is that yes, the obligation couched in this provision can be traceable to directive principles of state policy. And Article 41, as I was saying, which is the only reference to disability within the Constitution that I am aware of in terms of the obligations of the state, wherein it says that in cases of disability or other cases of undeserved want. So it's a very welfarist provision, which is couched in charity/welfare approach towards disability. Nonetheless, I think that does form the backdrop against which these provisions have to be seen. To your question as to making accessibility part of Part 3 of the Constitution, of course, there is no explicit enumeration of accessibility or even non-discrimination within Article 15. A long-standing demand has been that it be added as a disability be added as a ground on which you can't discriminate in Article 15. That has not yet happened, but there have been progressive judgments that have read accessibility into Article 21. So there was a judgment called State of Himachal Pradesh versus Ram Sharma, which was in the context of access to hilly regions in Himachal Pradesh and not having adequate roads that are suitable to get to those areas. And in that context, the Supreme Court said that Article 21 includes the right to accessibility. They didn't say it in the context of persons with disabilities, but then in the judgment in Rajiv Rathuri versus Union of India, the Supreme Court took that up and read it to and built on that sentiment to say that Article 21 can be read to include an unenumerated right to accessibility within it. And there is a Bombay High Court judgment on this point also, I think from 2009. And in the judgment in Vikash Kumar versus UPSC last year, a 3-judge bench of the Supreme Court said that the golden triangle of Articles 14, 19 and 21 applies with full force and vigor to persons with disabilities. So when it comes to legal entitlements, I don't think they are found lacking. Of course, explicit enumeration would be good, but there's enough that we have to work with right now. The question is, what do we do to operationalize these provisions?
Thank you so much, sir, for your answer. The Constitution of India guarantees all its citizens fundamental right to life. Right to education is also there. Right to information is also there. And there are many people, almost more than 1 billion people live with some form of disability. And 80% of them live in developing countries. So definitely these people are unable to fully exercise their fundamental rights also guaranteed by the Constitution. And the point which you just mentioned is completely valid, sir.
Right.
Coming to the next question, it is by Saurabh Das. He's a first year student. Saurabh, could you please join in?
Hello, am I visible?
Yes, Saurabh, you are visible.
Good evening, sir. Sir, I have a question that a lot of emphasis is laid on the digital accessibility, but how many faculty members in the mainstream colleges are capable of communicating and teaching a person with hearing impairment, and what can be done in this regard?
It's sad that most people would not be aware of or equipped to teach a person with hearing impairment, and particularly in a subject like law, which is discussion based and situation based or case based, I think it becomes very difficult. To start with, a few things can be done. One, like with persons who have partial hearing disability, I think if you speak little slowly, that also helps them. But largely sign language would be very important, and whatever text is displayed to the, like in online meeting, I think closed captioning would be important. So these are few things which would be important. And also a small workaround could be which like one of my friends who is hearing impaired, and he had requested his teachers to do was to summarize the discussions, and like instead of, if he would take it from a student, maybe he was worried about accuracy, so he would request the teachers to send bulleted points of the discussion later to him by an email. So that helped him to cope up.
In fact, recently Kerala government, I guess, they have also initiated a program like whiteboard program. Where all the teachers are equipped with the digital accessibility trainings and workshops, and they are doing that very in a very good way. So coming to the next question, it is by Simarjot Kaur. Simar, you can just go ahead with your question.
Good evening, sir. I hope I'm audible.
Yes. Good evening.
Sir, a data published by WHO highlights that 80% of the people with disabilities live in developing countries. And considering the limited resources of these countries, how can the inclusion of people with disabilities be guaranteed in developing countries? And also, what is your take on how have the developed countries safeguarded these rights?
See, I would say it is work in progress everywhere, but of course, countries that are more well-resourced are at an advantage when it comes to addressing accessibility needs. That goes without saying. But in terms of your specific question as to what we do in developing countries where there exist resource constraints, a couple of points I would make. One, we shouldn't assume, and I hope that our interventions here have made clear that accessibility is always going to be a very costly endeavor. It actually is often about mindfulness and being thoughtful upfront rather than having to retrofit things later. If digital accessibility is kept in mind, and even physical accessibility from the get-go, it can actually be integrated into whatever you are designing without having to incur additional costs, significant additional costs. Point number one. Second, I would also argue that in fact accessibility in certain circumstances can actually enhance a country's productive capacity and resources and generate employment. To illustrate, we were talking about audio description earlier. Now, if we added a mandate saying that all sports events, all cricket matches that are telecast on Doordarshan have to contain audio description for the benefit of people who are visually impaired, that would generate employment in the sense that there would be a new stream of work that would arise for commentators. They would have to give audio description. It would result in companies coming up and competing in this business to provide audio description to sports events, to news events, to movies, etc. It would also ensure that, it would uphold the rights of the disabled, of course, in terms of giving them access to entertainment content. But it would have these second order benefits, and it would also not curtail your viewing experience as a sighted person, because you wouldn't have to listen to it. It would only be accessible to those who wanted to listen to it, like you can choose on Netflix. So it's not always the case that sometimes it's the other way around, essentially, that accessibility helps generate more resources rather than consuming them. And then thirdly, I would say that even if it requires extra resources to be spent, then so be it. As a welfare state, it becomes our obligation to ensure that if we have to spend a little more to enable a disabled person to address the challenges that flow from their disability, then we better do it. What good are we as a country if we can't do that? And we have to find out. It can be no answer to tell a citizen. Now, I'll give you an example. In this Vikash Kumar judgment that we worked on, one of the arguments that was made was actually that there is a whole swathe of facilities that is being provided to persons with disabilities, from accessible ramps to public transport that is accessible, and things like that. So therefore, what if they are not given access to scribes in some circumstances? Like, that's okay. But the court said, and in my view rightly, that it can be no answer to tell a disabled person that, well, you are not doling out some kind of charity to them. You have to make whatever they need available as a state. And if just because you're doing something doesn't mean that you don't have to do others.
And also, Rahul, if I may add just one point.
Yes.
So I think also, as you mentioned, that it's like in a country which has a large demographic dividend. So if you do not make things accessible, in fact, you are burdening the state. Burdening the state, because a large population becomes unproductive, and then they become a burden on the state and their families.
Yes.
So if you equip them, it may benefit you otherwise. Like now, if your law studies and law courses are not accessible, so many people are prohibited from becoming lawyers, and your entire system is burdened. So what if you spend a little more and enable so many people to pursue what they want, and then contribute to the economy?
Yeah, it's a debate between that demographic disaster versus demographic dividend that we have in other contexts that applies here also.
Absolutely, sir. And sir, when we are talking about education, there's clearly a lack of harmony between the Right to Education and Right to Person with Disability Act. So what, according to you, can be a solution, or what legal and policy reforms are needed to bridge this gap? For example, if I'm recalling correctly, there was also a PIL filed last year, I think 2020, against those platforms by NCRT, Diksha, and e-Pathshala. So they were not accessible by everyone. And also, when Arogya Setu app was installed, was launched during the COVID time, it was also inaccessible, and a lot of pertinent information and COVID guidelines are there which were not accessible by the people. So there's clearly this clear violation of the law also. Would you like to comment over this?
Does anyone want to? I mean, again, I have strong thoughts on the matter, but if anyone else wants to go.
Space your microphone.
No, you go.
So, I mean, in terms of, so there are two parts to your question as I see it. One is the inconsistency between, you're asking the Right to Education Act and the RPWD Act. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, not the right to education itself, but the act. So, okay. So on that, there is actually a recent judgment by Justice Khanwilkar in the case of Rajneesh Kumar Pandey versus the state of Uttar Pradesh, I think it is, which talks about the need for there to be greater harmony. So, for instance, so basically, the RT Act actually defines inclusive education, which is a progressive thing, but actually it doesn't contain any specific norms on how it is to be attained. So for instance, it doesn't prescribe that schools which have persons with that mainstream schools have to have a teacher-pupil ratio, a different teacher-pupil ratio when there are students with disabilities in their midst. I think it is 5 for every 5 students, there's 1 teacher, something like that. But it doesn't actually have a different formula for ensuring the more effective integration of students with disabilities, which is necessary if they are to have a meaningful schooling experience. It doesn't talk about having access to assistive in terms of the norms that it lays down that all schools have to comply with. I think under section 20 of that act, it doesn't talk about the need to comply with accessibility norms to buy assistive technologies. So there is need to amend the law, and Vidhi, where I work, actually has put out a report on this, on how we bring the two laws, can bring the two laws in conformity with each other. So that is as far as harmony at the legislative level is concerned. In terms of the broader question of what we do to ensure accessibility of online learning platforms, or indeed accessibility of online government services, which is what I take the second part of your question to mean, there I think there is a need for a lot more work in terms of ensuring that there are actually, that we automate this to the extent we can. And I know that the Department of Empowerment for Persons with Disabilities in the government, central government, has been pushing for an automated solution when it comes to accessible documents, at least, that like whenever you release something, you can be prompted that it is inaccessible through the NIC platform, which is where government documents come out of. So that you can then, make sure that, for example, if it's an image-based PDF, which would be inaccessible, it will prompt you and it will tell you to release, to actually upload a text-based version. Something like that needs to be done to ensure that this is mandated, and to ensure that the mandate gets complied across the board. And that has to happen for apps also. Now, the CoWIN platform also earlier had accessibility issues. But we were working on a Supreme Court matter where these were flagged up, and I was just checking last week actually that many of these issues have now been addressed, thankfully. So it requires meaningful advocacy and making the government aware of these obligations and automating solutions to ensure compliance.
Definitely, sir. Web accessibility, I think, it's one of the biggest hurdle or biggest barrier in the issue right now. And right now, in fact, I would like to mention, presently only 19% of the websites are there which have alternate text for all the images right now. Then, sir, there is this another question. Kunzang, I'm so sorry if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. If you're there, you can ask your question.
Thank you so much. You could call me Dolma, which is my last name.
Okay, okay. Okay, Dolma, go.
I wanted to address a couple of things. It was quite informative, and it is amazing to see that all of us have gathered here to discuss. I think we're here discussing equality. Now, I'll just get to the point. We talked about disability, and I wanted to know. Let's say somebody has physical disability. That's why we have online classes. Let's say there's verbal disability, audio disability, visual disability. Now, visual. My question is for for a visually disabled person to access education. Why do we not have laptops with braille on it? And why companies, especially like CSR, Lenovo, Wipro, Dell, Apple, they are not including that as part of their CSR. Now, I am a businesswoman. I'm 37 years old. I'm pursuing LLB from Delhi University. I'm in first year. And Indian government has ensured that Amazon has to market products of artisans. So if the government can push companies as part of their CSR, why do we not have braille, I'm not sure of the term, but keys with braille on them to tackle visual disability? As far as audio disability is concerned, if you are aware, Eminem, who raps, we have had people who do sign language of raps. If that can be done, why do we not have a sign language teacher, or let's say a sign language translator in our online classes? All the people in Delhi University, all students, they get certain amount of funds to have translation books and things like that. Why do we not have a sign language translator for online classes? Now, as far as verbal disability is concerned, I think we have keyboards. They do not have visual or audio disability. They can write, access books. Physical disability, as we said, we have online. And as a student in first year, what I'm seeing is they're not there. It's either or nor. We have not gone into hybrid mode. People, all these physical accessibility that we are doing is all well and good. But when it comes to education, I think we need to allow digital accessibility of all the I think it's a physicality. I like the term disabled because they are specially able. They might have visual or physical disability, but that does not make them disabled. As far as Amarji, आपने कहा था कि stock market में वो वहाँ पर numbers होते हैं. My only question is, I don't know about the stock system, but then all these data are transmitted every 15-20 minutes. It's not like one हर minute का वो नहीं होता है. So why there is not a 15-minute talk or like just just reading out what is the stock for people who want to get into stock trading. That was one thing, and that's about it. And Amarji, I would like to hear your point of view, because at the end of the day, I'm more interested because you said we need to have a very broad understanding of things, and I would be very open to feedback if I've gone somewhere wrong. I think you would be the best person to guide me here. Thank you.
Sure. Rahul, Torab, do you want to first address anything? Then I'll
Go for it, Amar.
So I think
Amar, I think you should be.
Sure. So, Dolmaji, first of all, to your point on why do we not have laptops with braille on it? See, now, the advancements in technology have sort of, braille is definitely still one of the means for people with blindness to access information. But that means has now been taken over by advancements in technology. So now you definitely not need a specialized laptop which can cater only to people with disability. This is another approach that I think we all should stay away from.
Amarji, Amarji, I would like to just stop you here. I'm not talking about any other thing. It's just the top key. I mean, the feeding mechanism of a computer, it reads zeros and ones. I'm saying the key just has to have a point. People who do not have access to so many things, Braille, there is nothing wrong. We have ATMs with Braille on it.
Right. No, but
we have coins with Braille on it.
Braille, right? Because sorry. Go for it.
They can use the same technology that you are pointing out in ATMs also.
This could
because for me at this present moment, what I think is the most important thing is education, access to education. Not movies, not things. Most important thing for me, the foundation of the country, I think, for my side, it is access to education. Please excuse me if I'm I'm slightly dominating, probably at 37. So you get slightly dominating. I apologize.
I appreciate you bringing out this. I completely appreciate this. So this could be in addition to, see the problem. Okay, I'll tell you from a business perspective, where is the problem? The minute we ask for a special technology to be deployed into any device, and if there's any company which is doing that, the first thing that they want to know or want to gauge market about is where is my return, how much is my return on investment, right? So what is the ROI as a business that I'm going to make? And if the market is small, if the market is niche, then it's very difficult for me to make money out of it. And without money, surviving any business is difficult. So to the extent possible, we should try to...
Amarjit, this can come under CSR.
This
and I'm not talking like, I think it's just punching some extra dot on.
No, I'm saying this is worth exploring if it adds a lot of value. But all I'm saying is right now, there are so many technologies which even without any adaptation especially for people with disabilities allow you to access laptops and other gadgets. So you really don't need a special system in place which would allow people with disabilities to access content. So that is what I'm saying. The necessity of it has to be examined. Idea is good. Worth exploring, but considering the advancements in technology, I don't feel there's a need to come up with special setup or a special system where you have dots technology on laptops, etc. Because the normal laptop that is being used by everybody is very much capable of helping people with disabilities, provided that we have the right softwares installed. That's it.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Dodo, for your question.
Yeah. I was just coming to that.
Sorry, just to add one thing before that, if I may. Domat, you mentioned about whether companies are having inbuilt things. So, like the mobile phones have inbuilt softwares which enable us to use it like other people. So, it is factored in. So, the smartphones which we have, there is something called TalkBack on Android and VoiceOver on Apple. So, that is already done, at least as per mobile phones are concerned.
Yeah. In fact, even in Windows and Mac, there are software. So Mac, for instance, VoiceOver is very much an independent screen reader, which it doesn't require any other software on Mac for it to be accessible. Windows has been lagging a little behind, but I must compliment them that at least from Windows 7 onwards, they have made a good progress with their own inbuilt screen reading software called Narrator. So there are softwares. It's just a matter of choice that what people want to choose and how people want to go about it. Coming on to your
Amar sir, I would like to say one thing. Sorry. Should I? May I?
Sure.
Amar sir, I think you are one of the very few people who have an amazing set of skills, education, and a person who's able to think in all regards. Now, what I'm talking about is, we are talking about a population wherein kids are studying in school, they are in rural villages, government can give them laptops, but they do not have, because for a normal software, there are many people who work on a computer, they watch a movie, but they do not know how to use MS Excel also. So I'm saying rather than having that, dogs can actually make a difference for me. I feel that way. And a person like you, probably who's well read, who's very educated, you might find your way. You are actually advocating. You are in that position. What about maybe a larger chunk which has education which are not
Let me factually tell you that I come from Jodhpur, Rajasthan. I myself studied in a Hindi medium blind school till 12th. And I do know what realities you're talking about when you say about rural background. My 99% of my schoolmates were from rural background and did not have access to resources, did not have access to, forget anything else. We did not have access to books. We had to get people to record audio cassettes so that we could listen to it and pass our exams. We didn't have books after 6th class in Braille. So I completely understand where are you coming from. All I'm trying to say that technology.
I'm saying that there are very few people who would be driven like you are. There are very few people who would be driven like you are, who had this thirst for knowledge.
No, I appreciate that. I think all I'm trying to say is that technology has to be inclusive and integrative. If we create specific and special systems, it may further lead to exclusion. But by all means, I duly respect your point, and possibly this is something which may be worth exploring. So, of course, we'll have to evaluate, as we call it, the economic viable study. That is something what we'll have to do to be able to see whether this idea can really sustain in the market. Coming quickly, given the paucity of the time, and happy to discuss this offline with you, ma'am. Given the paucity of time, coming quickly onto your stock market question, the point that I was making is what you're talking about is 15 to 20 minutes or possibly 5-10 minutes is possibly the ticker that you see on the screen. What I was mentioning is that specific show where a strategy for the entire day is laid out, where the show is only meant for 15-20 minutes and all in total 30 minutes, which includes commercial ads. So within that time frame, how do you adjust things? That is, I think, important.
Thank you so much, Amar. Thank you, Dolma, for your question. I guess gradually we all are making the system accessible and the whole ecosystem accessible, I would say. We are little running short of time and it's already over an hour. Rahul sir, I just request you to take just one last question
Of
and
course.
we can then conclude the session if you permit.
Of course.
Thank you so much, sir. There's this question by first year student Moon. Moon, if you're there in the meeting, you can just go ahead with your question quickly.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. So my question is that 2 years back we were struck by this pandemic, and most of the educational institutes were shut down, and even today, like most of them are shut down. So the education suddenly shifted online, but it also brought out the insensitivity and carelessness of administration. They were insensitive to the needs of specially abled. So now when colleges are opening and some colleges are still closed, I would like to ask sir that, what roadmap you suggest the universities to take? What approach should universities take about, dealing with the specially abled students and to ensure them access to right information, study material, and to, redress their grievances?
So that is difficult in the sense that's a very that question has several parts to it. So I'm not sure that I can offer a detailed roadmap in the space of 1 or 2 minutes in terms of what can be done. But here are a couple of broad thoughts. I think one has every academic institution should view returning to campus life as an opportunity to reconfigure their practices to ensure end-to-end comprehensive and holistic accessibility for people with disabilities. And there is a need, number one, to ensure that there is a clear-cut mapping of what accessibility barriers exist in all of these areas, whether it be academic content, whether it be examinations, extracurricular, co-curricular activities, and that can happen through an accessibility audit of your website and the campus. Consulting, number two, consulting people with disabilities actively who are part of the university. And if you have no people with disabilities who are part of the university, then that in itself should prompt introspection as to why it is that is the case. And as a practical matter, then one should reach out to people outside the university who are disabled, get their inputs to see how changes can be instituted to make things better. Number three, making sure that this becomes something that happens on a regular basis. It's not just something that's done once as a lip service, but actually committing to doing regular audits on an annual basis to ensure accessibility. And number four, not looking at this in the sense of, as something that which can just be done with good intent. Because at the end of the day, accessibility is complicated, right? If you have to ensure an accessible physical environment, you have to get the nitty-gritties right. You need to make sure that that a particular passageway has certain width and a certain amount of, and it has ramps, and like there are very specific, very clear specifications that government guidelines contain with which you must comply to ensure that accessibility. You must be willing to put your money where your mouth is. It's not enough to say, oh, we are committed to accessibility, but when it comes to actually doing what needs to be done, saying that, look, oh, there are only 5 people with disabilities in this campus, so why should we spend money on this? This money would be better spent on something that will benefit a larger segment of the population, because that is not how rights work, number one. And number two, if you only have 5 students with disabilities, then that in itself is where your problem really begins. So that would be my answer to your question. I don't know if it's really an answer, if it's a rant more than an answer, but I hope that helps a little bit at least.
Thank you so much, sir. This was a very valid, very important issue which was highlighted by you and this question itself. So in the present time, when 20% people are there who cannot see in India, and they are the part of education system. So this already grim situation has got literally exaggerated by the COVID-19 pandemic crisis, and it is very important to understand these specific requirements also. Now, with this, I would like to conclude the session. I sincerely apologize to all those whose question we couldn't take up due to limited time. On behalf of DDS and Campus Law Center, sir, I would like to thank you for your gracious presence and for this interactive session. And it was a very fruitful session for every one of us here. We ensure that at least we would try our best that everything which is coming from our end to be digitally accessible for everyone. And in fact, the issue which you have raised initially in this meeting in the beginning, so on that also, I guess we have started working. So we made sure that yesterday and today, all the mails which we sent to the students in the morning also, we have added the alternate text to the images. And we would
thank you, Vandana. And if I may take the liberty of saying this as my concluding thought, this event will be truly meaningful, according to me. In addition to the brilliant conversation that we've had, it will be more meaningful, I should say, if we actually implement some reforms, in terms of getting your university to conduct an accessibility audit, university meaning your campus CLC, to conduct an accessibility audit of your website, of your campus, making sure that you frame an equal opportunity policy for your employees with disabilities as the RPWD Act says. Having a course on disability law as part of your curriculum and advocating for that. These kinds of reforms should be pursued so that it doesn't become something that we talk about for 1 hour and then go back to our lives, but actually something that forms the basis for meaningful and sustainable reforms.
Yes, sir. Definitely, we would inculcate this practice at all the levels which we can, and we have this enabling unit in our campus law center.
Yes, Vandana. Yes, we have actually Dr. Neha Aneja, who is the convener. She is with us.
Yes.
So maybe the enabling unit can work perhaps with you and.
Definitely, I would be happy to help. However,
Dr. Aneja, if you would like to say something.
Thank you so much, Anumeha. Good evening, Rahul sir. This side Neha Aneja.
Good evening, ma'am.
We shared platform together in international conference, if you remember, last time, which was held up by Bhumika Trust and Kirori.
Oh, I see. Yeah, in December.
Yes. There, and I got an opportunity to hear you at that time. It was really wonderful, and today also I was there. So it is a very wonderful lecture, and I have, got an opportunity to hear you and to learn certain more aspects relating to accessibility. So, sir, we are all, working on that. Almost we have done how far infrastructure is concerned. We are done. Yes, we are done with the accessibility. Means we tried to, enforce each and every right relating to the person with disability here in campus. We make sure that they should not suffer because of this, exclusion by not providing them accessibility.
Excellent.
How far digital accessibility is concerned, that is a challenge like everyone to us as well. But anyhow, we try to cope up with that and overcome those challenges during the online period when we had online teaching mode. So, but definitely your views will work as a guiding factor to us. Thank you so much for sharing your views here. Thank you on the part of enabling unit also.
Thank you very much. And just as a final word for those who would like to follow the work that we are doing on digital accessibility, please feel free to follow me on Twitter. I don't say this as a promotional gimmick, but actually it helps to have more people retweet and amplify your voice when you are going against service providers that are inaccessible. So that's the spirit in which I am saying this. I am at Rahul400 on Twitter, so feel free to follow the work that I'm doing on accessibility going forward.
One more thing, Rahul sir, I really want to say, I hope and I believe so, our association, your association with CLC will go ahead, and the EU is also looking forward to have a lecture with you to have awareness regarding the accessibility and other relevant issues on disability.
DU is yours, you said?
CLC, Campus Law Center. EU means enabling unit.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah, sure. We can work that.
I'll contact you later on. Thank you.
Definitely. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Anumya.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Aneja.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
I request Anumiha ma'am to kindly just give vote of thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vandana. I think it was a really enriching session for all of us, especially because yesterday I think Vandana and I were having a discussion and we realized the seat is slaps on our part, despite the fact, and it was quite ironical that we were having a lecture on right to digital accessibility, and that was something that we didn't realize. But I'm sure that after this session, we have learned from a mistake and we will work towards making things more accessible. And one takeaway, at least for me, that I have from this lecture is that we need an attitudinal shift. It's not that we do not have framework or legal policies in place. What we need is the right attitude to operationalize it. And to have that, I think we need to have more such interactions with people who have experiences and who are also working in this area, so that we can bring about reforms in our institution and otherwise. And with that, I would really like to extend a very heartfelt thanks to Rahul, Amar, and Turab for being here with us. And I hope this is just the beginning of the conversation. And we hope that our association with you, the CLC's association with you, continues.
Thanks so much. It's been so affirming and empowering to be here and to have a platform to share our work and thoughts with you.
Thank you. And lastly, I would also like to extend thanks to our professor in charge, Dr. Alka Chawla, our convener of the Debate and Discussion Society, Dr. Seema Singh, and the wonderful student members of the Debate and Discussion Committee. It's their event, and they are the one who have done everything. Thank you, everyone.